Believe it or not, there are so many questions and so much misinformation out there about the Six-Day War. Over the years, I've heard a lot of false claims that the 1967 war was started by Israel because it wanted to conquer more territory. I've also talked with so many people who have strong opinions about the settler movement, but actually still struggle to understand what really happened and how it got started. So let's dive in and get grounded on both of these questions. In the lead up to the war, Egypt received false reports from the Soviet Union that Israel was amassing troops on its border and was preparing for an all out invasion. Nasser, the then leader of Egypt, was quick to respond to these reports, both to protect Egypt and to advance his standing as a key leader in the Arab world. He amassed troops in the Sinai Peninsula, he expelled UN peacekeeping forces from Sinai, and he closed the Straits of Tiran, an important shipping route for Israeli trade. Syria also began to amass troops on its border with Israel, as does Jordan. Again, all of this action was precipitated by a false report. The next major step in escalating tensions is driven by another misunderstanding. One of the ways that Israel celebrated its independence was to host a military parade each year that showcased some of the best military equipment that the Israeli army had. In 1967, the government decided to hold the annual parade in Jerusalem, which was up until that point a demilitarized area. The Arab states were already on high alert, and they totally misconstrued this Independence Day celebration as evidence of an Israeli escalation towards war and as justification for their own escalating actions. Now, a serious game of brinksmanship was off and running. Israel was monitoring Arab radio stations that were constantly predicting that the upcoming war would be the end of Israel and that Arab armies would turn the Mediterranean Sea red with the blood of Jews. European media outlets repeated and amplified these messages. Soon, Israel was in such a state of panic, they felt like they were on the brink of utter destruction. The fear in Israel grew so pervasive that mass graves were being dug all around the country in anticipation of this imminent calamity. In an attempt to prevent this, Israel decided to preemptively attack on June 5th, 1967. By doing so, it caught the Arab forces off guard. Israel was able to destroy all of Egypt's air force within hours, and the Jordanian and Syrian air force later that day. The Israel Defense Forces captured Gaza and all of the Sinai Peninsula by June 10th. Over the next few days, Israel was able to overpower Jordanian ground forces, and Israel was able to take control of Jerusalem and the West Bank. On the northern front, Israel routed the Syrian forces and took control of the Golan Heights. In just 6 days, Israel went from preparing for the ultimate destruction of their new state to a massive military victory that tripled its land area. To say the least, Israel was not prepared for this turn of events, nor was it prepared for how to manage the approximately 1 million Palestinians that were now under its control. The Israeli government lacked a consensus about what to do after the war. While there were voices in Israel that saw the West Bank as land that should be part of Israel permanently, both for security reasons and because it contained many important historical sites for Jews dating back to the Bible, the leading idea was that these conquered territories could be traded for peace with other Arab nations. But rather than establishing a clear national plan or making an official proposal to these Arab states, Israel became captivated by a strange mix of euphoria and indecision. The West Bank, in particular, reawakened some old spiritual and romantic notions from early Zionism that imagined a future where Jews could reclaim ancient biblical lands. For the first time in 20 years, East and West Jerusalem were reunited. Jews could go back into Arab neighborhoods to visit different artisans or spice dealers that they frequented before the 1948-49 war. And at the same time, Arabs were able to go back to areas in West Jerusalem to visit friends or places where their family may have lived during the British Mandate period. There were also strange stories about the oddball hero of the Six-Day War, Moshe Dayan. He would go for late-night Jeep rides all over the West Bank and engage in unofficial and unapproved archaeological digs looking for ancient Jewish artifacts. The more one reads about this period of time, the more one gets a sense of how strange and surreal it was. During this moment of indecision and euphoria, another idea emerged in Israeli society that shaped the future of Israeli history leading up to today. The concept was creating facts on the ground, or in Hebrew, uvdot b'shetach. The expression facts on the ground refers to the idea that while the Israeli government may have been unclear about its long-term plans for the newly acquired territories, there were other Israeli leaders, mayors, and military commanders, and religious authorities who decided to exploit this moment of indecision and create their own facts on the ground, regardless of whether they were officially sanctioned by the government. It is through uvdot b'shetach, or facts on the ground, that many of the first Jewish settlements are established in the West Bank and even in the Golan Heights. Let's look at a couple examples. If you've ever had the chance to go to the Western Wall in Jerusalem, you've probably spent time in this large plaza that is in front of the Wailing Wall. I've been there many times myself, and I've never actually thought about where that plaza might have come from. It turns out it was created through the principle of facts on the ground. There are pictures and books and online resources that show what things looked like before 1967. And rather than there being a large plaza, what we see is that there was a narrow pathway that separated the Wailing Wall from a mix of homes that were in the old city of Jerusalem. But after the Six-Day War, there was a desire to expand this area so it could accommodate larger groups of people. This was especially true in advance of the holiday of Shavuot, when thousands of Jews were expected to come and pray near the Western Wall. An order was given to create this plaza, and no one is quite sure who gave it. Most people think it was the mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, but there are other leaders who claim that they gave the order, and we may never know for sure. Most of the residents in this area had already fled during the war, but for those who remained, notifications to relocate were issued, and after a short grace period, the order was given to demolish part of this neighborhood in order to create room for this new, larger plaza. Another example of facts on the ground is how the Jewish settlement in the city of Hebron was established. This city is considered a holy biblical city in Jewish tradition. Leading up to the festival of Passover in 1968, Rabbi Moshe Levinger requested a permit to host a Seder for his family and some of his followers in a hotel in Hebron. But after Passover ended, Rabbi Levinger and his followers simply stayed in the hotel until the Israeli government agreed to move them to a military compound that eventually became the settlement of Kiryat Arba on the outskirts of Hebron. This is another example of Israeli leaders creating facts on the ground in ways that forced the government to accommodate them. Not all Jewish settlements in these territories were new. For example, after 1967, Jews moved back to the Gush area in order to recreate the community that was there but had been defeated and massacred in the 1948 war. You can find many sources online and in books that will help you understand how other settlements were created after 1967, including Jewish settlements in Gaza and in the Sinai Peninsula. By and large, the development of settlements was slow and nonlinear during the 1970s and 80s. The major growth of settlements actually took place in the 1990s and beyond. We often think that the story of Jewish settlements was easy and that they were all founded for strong ideological reasons. But the reality is that there are many reasons that Jewish settlements were created. Some were motivated by ideology, but others were created as a way of trading favors to hold together complicated government coalitions. Some settlements were motivated simply by the need to create affordable housing outside major cities that just didn't have enough apartments to go around. But by understanding all of these different factors, it helps us understand that the settlements are not one thing. The reality is that the settlement movement is just as complicated as all other features of Israeli history, and in this way, the settlements and the people who live there also defy simple characterization. One of the accusations against Israel that we sometimes hear is that the very existence of settlements now makes it impossible to reach a peace agreement or to create a Palestinian state. In future decades, Israel will show that both of these accusations just don't hold water. Both at Sinai in 1979 and in Gaza in 2005, the Israeli government is willing to uproot settlements in order to achieve peace or some other strategic goal. There is a lot of room to debate about the settlements, and we see this both among Israelis and folks in North America. That said, the history adds nuance and complexity that helps us understand that assigning one meaning or one intention to the existence of settlements is often misleading and misrepresents what really happened. Now that we've gotten grounded in the real history of what happened in 1967 and the immediate aftermath, and we even understand a little bit more nuance about the founding of the settlement movement and what those settlements mean today, it's time for us to jump to the next major tension point in Israeli history, which is the first Palestinian uprising called the Intifada in 1987. I hope you can join us then, and I look forward to seeing you soon.